afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Where we try to dig a little bit deeper into the issues that are affecting us this day. Now, I promised last week's show, in which I dealt with 6 reasons why men are gravitating away from or refuse to get married. And I said I was going to deal with women. And of course, I am. It's kind of interesting, I have to say this, that not to brag, but when I go through these shows on YouTube and I check the analytics, I have about 50-50. When it comes to male and female views on the programs that I do. And when I've said that to a couple people that I've interviewed that are somewhat more on the conservative side of issues. And they were actually quite surprised because they said in their analytics, they tend to come up with like 80% male and 20% female. And I didn't really have an explanation for it, except for maybe I try to be a little bit more comprehensive on issues and try to deal with both sides. And I think there's a lot of common ground that we can find when it comes to examining social and political issues. And so obviously I'm going to deal with 6 reasons why women are not gravitating to marriage the way they used to. Now, before I begin, I'd like to encourage people that if you're listening to this later on YouTube to please subscribe to this channel, and that'll allow you to keep up with shows that in the future if you can't actually tune in to the live show. And also, please check out my new sci-fi book, which actually deals with this whole male-female dynamic to a very large degree. And that's called The Destiny of Our Past. You can find that on Amazon. And it's a science fiction book that, the story, it's a thriller, sci-fi thriller, taking place during the era of Noah. And in case you're curious as to how that could be, you'll just have to check out the book. Okay. So anyway, 6 reasons why women are not getting married the way they used to. Now, a lot of these are actually reasons for men too, but I'm just going to begin like I haven't even done the show on men. And I have to say that, the marriage rate is half of what it was in 1960. People are getting married at much later ages. And, the birth rate is correspondingly going down and down and down. I would say that probably once we get to the millennials are already starting to hit 30 or above. I think that once you get females hit their early 40s, and I mean very early 40s of the millennial generation, you're going to find a very large percentage that will never have kids. And if you consider the implications of that, that means entire family lines are going to disappear. All right? I know many families, even from conservative religious backgrounds, that this is it. They're gone. They are history once they die. There's no posterity. I know lots of situations where you have maybe only 2 kids that were born to the family, and neither the boy or the girl or the 2 girls or the 2 guys ever married and had kids. Now, you could say that maybe in some cases where guys don't get married to 40 or so, they can get married to someone younger and start a family. But women, when they start hitting the early, once they pass 40, their chances of having kids is in free fall. And, there's just so much of this going on now. And I think it's really sad that we're going to have many, many elderly orphans. So why would someone forego the chance of getting married in the time period when they're young and they can start families? Well, first of all, I think a lot has to do with divorce. Now, you would think, and it was actually promoted when we started the whole no-fault divorce thing, the idea was promoted that people would have more happiness if it's like bankruptcy. You get married to the wrong person when you're really young, and then later you at least have the option of divorcing them fairly easy. And then you can move on with your life and find someone who is more to your liking, that you're more compatible with, that you're more happy with. The strange thing about that is you don't even have to be a neo-Freudian to understand that we tend to gravitate to the same people. Okay? And that's true for men too. Men who leave their wives and go and find someone else, generally speaking, they're marrying the same person that their wife was. She might be younger, she might be more attractive, but personality-wise, she winds up being the same person. And the same is true for women. They leave a guy, and they're going to find a guy that is probably the same, in fact, in many cases worse, but still with the same personality traits. We're attracted to the same kind of people overall. But the whole no-fault divorce thing really promoted the idea that, this could be good for people and good for families because then people could correct early mistakes. I don't think that's really true, especially since we've seen a lot of the people that come from divorce, that come from families where they grew up, mom and dad getting a divorce, they become a little bit less likely, or I should say a lot less likely to marry. And it's because there's a certain level of, well, if mom and dad didn't make it, who's to say I'm going to make it? And as they see the old, they remember back when they were little kids, and they remember mom and dad used to get along really well, and they were happy, and they did everything together. And then maybe when they're 10 or 12, mom and dad divorce. Well, they're in a relationship with someone. Everything's great. And they're thinking down the road. Women are thinking, well, what if this guy I'm with it just turns out the same way? Maybe I'm, damaged goods. Maybe he's damaged goods. Maybe they're both damaged goods. Whatever the case may be, things are just going to fall apart. So we have a situation where a lot of people are really scared to repeat the mistakes of their parents. And, I think that's a valid concern. However, like I said with men, if life is chances. When you get in the car and you turn the ignition on, do you realize that every time you get in that car and go down the road, you could wind up a bloody mess in a car wreck? Okay? Statistically, it won't happen. But there's the chance that you're the one that's going to be on the nightly news. They're crying out with the jaws of life and your legs are all mangled up and have to be cut off and so forth, or you're just, dead. Okay? That is a possibility every time you go out in the car. But yet, most of us still get out in the car and drive. Now, divorce statistics are not that half of marriages end in divorce. Half of people end up divorced. It is half of marriages end up in divorce, which means that when you see someone who's been married 4 times, that accounts for 4 divorces. So you would have to have a bunch of people who never divorced to get the statistic that will even out and say that 1/2 of marriages equal divorce. Okay? So that's something to really keep in mind. Most people who get married to someone will be with them until one of them dies. That's just the way it is. It should be a larger number of people with someone, but statistically, your chances that if you're getting married, especially first time, you're not going to get divorced. And if you share similar characteristics with the person that you're getting married to, then your chances are less that you'll get divorced. Shared characteristics, values, aspirations, ideals, religion. In all likelihood, you'll be together. If you enjoy each other's company now, you'll enjoy it later. So, that's something to keep in mind. Even if you have been from a divorce situation, you don't have to repeat the same thing that your mom and dad did. Now, another reason that, I've noticed that women have that they don't want to get married, or that they express that they don't want to get married, is that it's such a critical choice. Okay? When you go out and buy a house, you realize that, some people, first house they buy is the same house they live and die in. But even if you intend on buying a starter home and later upgrade to a bigger home, you do realize that it's a major, major choice, and it's one you're going to have to live with. Well, the consequences, whether you bought good or bad, are going to live with you for the rest of your life. I know people that have made bad business decisions and, they're still having to pay debts off. So, the same is true for marriage. Now, the thing is, I think our society has really, and all these stupid Hollywood movies in which the woman who waited until, she's like 39 years old and all of her friends are, this is the typical plot. Her friends are married and envious of her freedom and so forth. They're not they're not happy. They're chasing kids around. And here she is, this career woman wearing fancy clothes. She waited, but then Mr. Right comes along. He's perfect. He's like this perfect man who just never found the right woman. I'm sorry. If a man wants to get married, generally he's not this super gorgeous, successful, charming individual who, when he's 39, 40, or 41 or whatever, just never wound up in a relationship that really worked. I'm sorry, that's just not going to be the case. A woman that finds that is not going to let him get away. Okay, so Hollywood is fiction. That's all it is. Fiction, fiction, fiction. And that should be understood. But still, it goes into people's minds. That's what people think. And often, Hollywood presents, whether intentionally or not, I would argue probably intentionally, emphasizes failure. Good storylines don't involve, married happily ever after. They do in children's cartoons, but not for dramas. You gotta have something going on. You gotta have cheating. You gotta have unhappiness. You've gotta have abuse, because that gives you drama. Okay? You can't have a crime mystery without crime. You can't have a drama without some sort of tragedy and intrigue and also problems. But people watch this and they think this is reality. Okay? They think it's reality. And so they see all these failures over and over and over again. And, at an emotional level, women are going to be like, oh my gosh, this is really harsh. I don't want to wind up like that. And there's always, like I said, with the whole Hollywood dramas that are aimed at women primarily, there's always this idea that there's always a better choice just around the corner. There's always time to wait. Don't get married when you're 23. Wait till you're 26. Wait a minute, 26 is still young. Maybe when you're 30, it's time to settle down. Wait a minute, Are you sure 30? Are you sure you got your career all set? You sure you sure that you're, what do they call it, grounded in where you should be? Maybe you should wait to, give it a couple more years and a couple more and a couple more, and pretty soon it's menopause. Okay? Sorry, that's just the way it is. I do know there are women who, when they're 35, all of a sudden they do meet a guy who's 60 and he's a pretty good widower and, and all this, and hey, wait a minute. Women are going, wait. You mean 35 married to a guy who's 25 years older? And, to a large degree, your chances of getting married at 35 to another 35-year-old male is not very great. If he's 35 and for some reason his whatever long-term relationship that never led to marriage falls apart, he's generally looking, and you can look at surveys over and over again, it's true, he's looking for women who are in their mid-20s. I'm just stating what is statistical fact. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. And so this is a problem. Women in their 30s do have a severe, I don't know if it's as hard as that one. Years ago, there was like this, your chances of getting married over 30 is, I can't remember, it was just horrendous, like winning the lottery or something. I don't think it's that hard. But again, the older you get without getting married, the harder it is to get married. That's true for men, but I'm not going to deal with men right now. I get that. There's many men, though, that I've known who they wind up divorced when they're 37, and maybe they know some people that are in their 20s, through shared interest or work or whatever, and those guys in their 20s are going, hey, wait a minute, why are you getting dates and I'm not? In fact, I've known guys who, they have like 4 kids and women are wanting to marry them because there's this maternal instinct or something that, oh, I'd love to jump in there and help you raise your kids. Okay? But I'm not going to get into the dynamics of evolutionary psychology right now. I'm just saying that there is this thing that's really been pushed in entertainment that says there's always a better one around the corner. If you do get married, you're going to wind up unhappy. You're going to be a failure. All these kinds of things. So just wait. Maybe the next one. Maybe the next one. No proof of that. Now, this goes along with it is that whole idea of loss of freedom. I've seen women complain that their parents are all like, well, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? And they feel this kind of push, and they don't like that. They don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to be pressured towards marriage. But there's also an idea that a woman might receive that when she gets married, well, this limits her. When you get married, generally speaking, you're saying that this is the sexual partner I'm going to have for the rest of my life. I'm talking about the traditional heterosexual marriage. There won't be any other person involved in this. And so that's one thing. The other, and of course that means no variety anymore. It means that you also have someone that you have to consider their needs as well. You have to consider such things as where they want to live. A lot of times you'll have someone that says, oh, I want to live, one marriage partner will say, I want to live in Los Angeles. I love Los Angeles. I love the nightlife. And someone else is more like, well, but what about the countryside? There's plenty of actually people that would rather live in Bakersfield, California or Fresno than live in LA or San Francisco. There's other people that would rather live up in the mountains near Mount Shasta and be totally isolated. But when you get married to someone, you do lose a certain level of your freedom. Okay? You've got someone else you have to share a house with. You've got someone that you've got to make choices of what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be going, and so forth. So that is a consideration that, goes into it. The idea that you're going to lose some freedom. And some people just don't like that. Now, I would say overall that the loss of freedom has a benefit that far outweighs it. You do have someone that you're connected to. You have someone who you can count on, you're comfortable with, that knows everything about you and you know everything about them, and you're growing together. But that's not what's emphasized so much in media nowadays. All right, even when they show an older couple in many movies, they're kind of like, oh, if I only had it to do over again. Horrible messages that go out there. Again, another thing that goes along with that, like I said, is the loss of choice. You don't have that ability to, a lot of times you have to make sure that if both people have careers, that they're both going to be able to have work in the same community and so forth. So that's going to create some problems. Let's say one's a school teacher and the other one's an ad executive, but the school teacher's offered a job, in Bend, Oregon. It's a moderately small community, city. Probably not a lot of jobs in the ad agencies there, at least the big ones. So, these create problems. But again, what you're getting back is so much greater. For all the freedoms you lose, you get a lot more opportunities. For all of the choices that no longer are there, you get other choices that come in. I will have to say that life is a choice. Every time you make a choice, when you choose a major in college, that means you can't do the other majors. When you decide to get married, it's no different. Okay? But that's what life was all about originally for thousands and thousands of years. You choose, and then that's a new road you're on. Then you have choices along that road, and then you choose that, and you're on another road, and so on and so forth. Now, another thing that people throw in is boredom. I understand this. There's the idea that when you first start a relationship with someone, you have a flood of dopamine in your brain. There's the whole idea of your heart is going to race and all that kind of stuff. But no matter who they are, I don't freaking care if you're together with James Bond or a James Bond type person. By the way, if you are, watch out, because, relationships with psychopaths can often go quite bad. The thing is, you're in this new relationship, and some people become relationship junkies. Once it starts wearing off, then they find a new one. Part of the pursuit of a new person, and then they're with this person, and then eventually it starts getting to, well, what do you want to watch tonight here? That sort of thing. But that's going to happen no matter what. Okay? And of course, any couple can decide to do things that are different. I haven't started talking about children yet. I'm going to. But they can decide to do things that will allow them to always keep a spark of creativity in their relationship. Couples that travel. I don't mean like, oh, I'm going to go on a trip around the world and visit Tibet. I wouldn't necessarily suggest Tibet if you're sensitive to oxygen deprivation. Nice place. But anyway, couples that do things together, that do things that are different, that do things that are novel, they can keep this excitement alive. But it's always better to know that there's someone there than always this idea that, okay, well, this guy I'm with, he's great, he's fun, as long as they use birth control, everything's good. But probably by next year, I'll, be probably reevaluating this relationship. If you're thinking in the terms of reevaluating the relationship, why waste his time? Just drop him now. I mean, seriously, if you don't want to get married, just, maybe he does. Maybe he will want to get married. And you're keeping him from the marriage market. But ultimately, this whole idea of boredom, well, you know what? If you're really thinking, oh, I don't know, marriage is boring, then why don't you read one of these articles about, this goes for both genders too. Why don't you read one of these articles about, elderly orphans? Is this true for guys? It's true for girls. Once you get to a certain age, the fun stuff just isn't, the same way. Most of your friends are married or buried, depending on how old you are. And eventually you just get to this point where the things that used to, going out to the singles bars, for instance, if you think that's fun, if you're middle age and still going to the singles bar, then I'll bet you're not getting the same results, the same quality of partners that you did when you were in your mid-20s. Okay? And also, and the thing is that your people are going to look at, when you're starting to get some gray hair, they're going to be thinking, well, what are you doing here? It's different if you're one of these people that still goes out to the gym and does those kinds of things. That's fine. But if you're trying to do things, if you're out with, trying to skateboard and stuff, or do things that are more oriented towards, you dress in, really skimpy party dresses and stuff like that, and you've got gray hair, people are starting to look at you a little different. Remember what you used to think 20 years ago about such people? Think about that for a moment. And, boredom itself, you're going to be more bored if you're single. Okay? And cats do not fill the boredom. Dogs don't fill the boredom. Hey, I love my pets. Okay? My kids, though, are what gives me meaning in life. I love the pets, to me, bring a lot of meaning to the life of my children. Okay? And that's something here that we need to discuss, this idea that our society has made it. I talk to people from countries like Syria or from Iraq, and they say, my gosh, I can't understand why Western women are so scared of having kids. They overemphasize fear of pregnancy. They overemphasize the work you have to do to raise children. Don't they understand that it's actually a blessing and it's fun to raise a family? This is what I hear from women from Syria and Iraq. Okay, I talked to a woman from Syria a while back, and she was like, I can't believe how many young women are deciding to raise pets rather than to raise kids. And, the thing is, we've had this constant bombardment in our media that has said, oh, kids are bad, 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 bad. But I think this is an extension of the whole population control propaganda of the early 1970s. But it's become so institutionalized now that children are akin to, getting a venereal disease. Kids are fantastic. They are fun. They add dimension to both men and women's lives. But they've been presented as they're horrible, to the point that sometimes when you're in a discussion on the internet and you just say, hey, kids are great, you'll get someone that'll respond like, why are you telling me what to do? You're being intolerant. And you're just like, well, kids are fantastic. But you're trying to force that choice on me. And you're going, no one's forcing you to get pregnant. But you're shaming me because I'm not pregnant. And you're like, no, I'm not. I'm just saying how good. Am I shaming someone for going to one restaurant versus another if I say I really like this restaurant? But we have been so propagandized, so indoctrinated that women and men both, if you present the idea of how wonderful kids are, they're just like, no. And just like Edward Bernays said, our taste, our values, our political philosophy, our religious philosophy is the result of elite people who you don't even know their names for the most part, unless you've really done investigations. And they're working behind the scenes through media, through movies, through education, to promote an ideal that you're not the one who initially said that was your ideal. It's just that you've only had one side to the issue, and that side has just been negative, 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 negative. But a lot of women, no, I don't want to have kids. I have actually noticed one thing, though, in fairness. I only had one relationship with someone who the person initially said she never wanted to have kids. Well, that broke off, obviously. But the thing is, I've noticed a lot of women who've complained that they've gotten in relationships with men who refuse to have kids. And I think that's way more common for men than it is for women. Okay, I really do. I really do think that more women want kids than men. I think in the future we're going to have some sort of weird form of polyamory or polygamy because of technological advances and more men becoming, they're not going to be celibate. They're just going to have their Westworld style sex robot, and that's it. But again, there are women who, will think about their freedom, and this all has a common denominator for the most part. The whole, I'm going to lose my freedom. I'm going to be bored. I'm going to have to make critical choices right off. And what am I going to do? And is it going to be right? This is what has been sold into our entire society aimed at both men and women. It's this idea that marriage is like a big old, one of those old prison steel balls connected to your leg. And I would actually say it's not the case. Okay? I mean, it's like with families that someone will say, you've got, some kid will be complaining, oh, my mom and dad had 5 kids and it was really tough. You say, oh, do you wish you could go through time and not have your youngest brother or sister? I'm like, no way, I love my brother. It's, it's easy to complain, but ultimately if you ask the average married person, do you wish you could just not be married? And let's say financially it would not affect you. Let's say you win a lottery and you could just split the proceeds and go your merry ways. I don't think the majority of people would want to do that. I think the majority of people want to be with that person. Okay? I mean, they've had to struggle. They've had to survive. They've had to fight together. And, having children is much easier when you are together. There are single people that do a really great job, but ultimately being married is much easier, especially when you consider, having the flu and you've got a kid who needs you there, and you're sick. It's much better for there to be a husband, wife, kids sort of thing. And again, I'm dealing with mostly hetero. If someone's gay and they're listening to this, I apologize. I'm just saying that this is the standard marriage, pattern traditionally. And I have done shows. I did a show a few years ago on lesbians having children. So I'm just saying right now that this is a more for the standard male-female relationship. And I really do think, again, we see very few children being born right now in the developed world. And if you really think about it, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, it costs so much, it's such a pain, it's this and this and this. I mean, if you put it on a scale of things, I think that, the average parent ultimately will admit it's wonderful. Okay? And I think our instincts are designed, both male and female, to want to reproduce. This is why the society is so negative to it. If humans were naturally selfish and didn't want to reproduce, you would have to have the society promoting childbirth to even get to anywhere close to replacement. Instead, you've got a society that just promotes how horrible it is. And yet, still people have kids. Less and less now, because it seems like the propaganda has been very effective. But ultimately, I would just ask people to think about where they're going to be in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 40 years. Because the average person who right now is in their 20s or 30s, some in their 40s, are going to still be alive 30, 40, or even 50 years from now. And the family relations they're going to have in the future are going to be based on what they're doing right now. And some of these things are, not possible to reverse. Choices are made early in life that will affect you later in life. And so with that in mind, I would, we're coming up on the end of the segment here. I would just encourage people to think about this. This is not you get these men who are like, oh, I'm just going to, men going their own way, or you get women who are like, oh, men suck and that sort of thing. Sit back and realize humans are humans. The human species is male and female. And when it cooperates with each other, it reproduces and continues the human species. But when it doesn't, that species dies out. Or at least those family lines die out. The ones that do cooperate and get along and have kids, they will persevere into the future. That's Darwinism. You see, that's where Darwin and the Bible intersect with each other really nicely, because they agree, at least on that issue.
The first part of the show, I dealt with the idea of why women, 6 reasons why women were maybe not getting married nowadays. And last week I dealt with 6 reasons why men were not getting married nowadays. We are at the lowest point we've ever been when it comes to marriage and when it comes to reproduction. Okay? Not so good for the future if that's the case. We're going to have a lot of family lines that are just going to totally perish if things don't turn around. But what I'd like to deal with is one segment of the population that probably will not be hurt that much when it comes to being able to find a spouse. And those are the, 2 personality disorders. One of them is psychopathy, and the other one is narcissism. And I'm going to deal with why these people have such a distinct advantage when it comes to relationships, and when it comes to basically all goals. I mean, they seem to be very much into the winning way of looking at things. But before I proceed with that, encourage people that if you're listening to this later on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to this station. And that'll keep you up on new shows in the future in case you're not able to listen. And also check out, I'm going to link at the bottom my official webpage. And check out also my new sci-fi book where it deals a lot with this kind of subject, The Destiny of Our Past. It's a dystopian sci-fi with the plot set back in the era of Noah. Okay, so why is it that these 2 types of people seem to do so well when it comes to relationships? Now, I don't mean that in the long term, okay? I mean they're able to establish relationships. They may not be as good at holding on to them, but they're pretty good in getting them going. Okay? I was looking at an article today in BBC, and it was about how our brain chemistry is affected by our mood. Now, that's a very interesting concept because our mood can affect our brain chemistry. Okay? If we're down, if we feel down, then such things as dopamine, testosterone, and a whole bunch of other hormones that you probably never even heard of, they decrease. And what can actually increase is like cortisols and other types of substances that actually are not good for you. They actually, they're associated with immunology. But if you're always worried and you send your body into this idea that, oh my gosh, I'm in peril, then it starts breaking down your health. And so your mood can affect your brain, but your brain can affect your mood because it's perception. You're going to look at a situation and you're going to think, well, you could think a whole bunch of different avenues of thought and also action. And that's going to be mediated by your personal experience, your taste, and values, and so forth. So the thing is, it's a complex interplay between what's going on in the environment and what's going on inside your head. Okay? Now, what's interesting are emotions such as guilt often lead to self-doubt. Guilt causes you to start feeling bad about yourself. Well, if you feel bad about yourself, you're starting to, okay, the body's not that smart, really. The body works in a way like what's a good way of, I could relate it to dogs, A dog may do something without really knowing why they're doing it, and the body is the same way. It's in a way, it's this oversimplification, but it can work in kind of a reflexive mode. So you feel guilty over something you did or you didn't do. You doubt yourself. You are self-critical. And this will actually decrease the hormones that are associated with actual action, such as serotonin, testosterone. And that's true for both men and women. True, but it's more pronounced, it seems, in men. So let's think about this for a moment. I've gone over a lot of the traits of psychopathy. And some of the ones that really stand out is lack of empathy and lack of a guilt complex. The very little guilt registers. And also a sense of not liking to be bored. And added to that is a grandiose sense of self. Now, these overlap. Narcissist and psychopaths, although not all narcissists are psychopaths, all psychopaths are narcissists. And to just be oversimplistic here, a narcissist is not just someone that walks by the mirror and goes, oh, I am so beautiful. No, a narcissist is someone who really truly does see the world revolving around them. And there's speculation as to whether psychopathy and narcissism are genetic. It does seem to run in families, and adoption, where studies done on adopted siblings and so forth. If you take a child who has none of these kinds of, you put a child from an environment where they never, didn't seem to be any psychopaths or narcissists, and then they're adopted by someone who's a psychopath or narcissist, they generally don't show the characteristics, and vice versa. Someone who comes from that kind of environment, who then is adopted out, will still show those characteristics. Although there is an interplay, a very complex interplay between values and nurturing at home, which will at least mediate where the child will go. It's sort of like, again, using the dog analogy. If I get a dog that has more of a vicious nature, and I treat it with total kindness, then probably the dog will be good. It'll be a nice dog, but it has a much higher chance of doing something bad, as opposed if I take a dog like a golden retriever, which has been bred for gentleness, then in all likelihood it will not go bad. It won't do those kind of vicious things we read about in the newspaper that happens to people that own pit bulls or something. Not all pit bulls. I mean, it's probably someone that owns a pit bull out there is going, no, my pit bull's really nice, but I'm just saying, you probably, if it is nice, you raised it nice. Okay? But I think you'd have a hard time getting a golden retriever to become as vicious as a pit bull, even if you raised it to be such. So humans are the same way. And so let's think about how just what we have talked about here about the brain enables the psychopath or the narcissist to get their way. Well, for one thing, if they are looking at life, and this is often a way that you can kind of tell their personalities, if they're looking at life like one big game, okay? If they're looking at life like they're in a virtual reality game in which the objective is to win, then they're not going to be held back as much in what they do, what they say, how they behave. Now you might think, well, that's going to get them in trouble. They'll be beaten down by society, and they will have a lot of those nice, go-get-em hormones reduced. And maybe that could happen if they lack intelligence and they wind up in jail. And there's a higher rate, especially for psychopaths, to wind up in prison. But what about the ones with the high intelligence? Okay? They will compete from day one for success. And each success they have will build upon their confidence and sense, that grandiose sense of self. And it will continue growing. And I will point out one thing that I haven't pointed out enough, I don't think, when we've dealt with these subjects. That is, the psychopath and the narcissist tend to look at people who are kind of like second-guessing themselves or don't try. They don't want to take a chance because they could lose. They feel ashamed to try something that might enable them to win more often. They look at them with complete contempt. They see empathy and they see guilt as being things that hold people back. Now, in a cognitive, academic sense, psychological sense, they're right. Okay? People that have a lot of guilt wind up being depressed. And that holds you back from succeeding at your goals. Whereas if you have very little guilt, you see, guilt and empathy are things that they come in varying degrees. But I think it'd be very rare for someone not to have any of it. But the thing is that when it comes to empathy, there's a lot of evidence to show that psychopaths can turn it on or turn it off. Okay, so if they see a war scene in which they see a family that's been blown up, they may look at that like the U.S. government, where collateral damage. And it doesn't faze them at a core level. Whereas if that family looks like their family, then that could faze them. All right? It's not so much that they're going to be really caring about that family that, in the war zone, but it will shake them because they connect. But they can switch that on and off at will almost. Regular people can't do that. Think of the advantage that gives them, though. Okay? They're running for political office. And their campaign manager says, okay, well, it looks like the press found out about such and such. What are we going to do? The psychopath and the narcissist, especially the psychopath, I should say, in this first one, the psychopath is going to have no problem in lying and to be able to protect themselves. The narcissist will also lie, but is to protect their persona, what they've created about themselves, and they want people to love them. The psychopath doesn't care about love. The psychopath cares about support. So they want to win the election. They care how the voters feel. The narcissist actually does want people to love them. And so therefore, they will still be able to twist the truth and lie their way out of it. Whereas a regular person might get up there and they'd start showing all those signs of lying. You hear these people that are like body language experts, and my gosh, I've seen some of these in regards to even psychopathy. How to tell a psychopath by their body language. You know what? I don't think that's possible. Because the psychopath can actually, and I think the narcissist to a large degree too, can fake their body language to fit whatever act they're putting on. Whereas a person, a regular person, if they have to suddenly say a half-truth or a lie or turn the issue around to attack the opponent rather than to address the issue, they may feel bad about that. They might, instead of having really good speech patterns, they might stumble. They might start looking around in different directions. They may do all those telltale signs that people look at and go, oh, I think he or she's being dishonest. Well, the psychopath or the narcissist, it won't matter. Okay, you can't look at them and say, oh, she's looking that direction all the time. Not with them. It won't matter. And when it comes to relationships, you're talking about this era of people not having good relationships. You know, the more single people there are out there, the more happy hunting grounds there are for psychopaths and narcissists. People don't actually realize that. In the old days, people tended to get married when they were like in their early 20s. And so you had this like pyramid thing where at the base, most people got married between 19 and 23. Then the next base, those are the people getting married after college, and then there would be the next base. And then you got to what a lot of people affectionately would call the leftovers. The mismatches, the people that just for some reason didn't fit people very well. And they'd get married maybe in their late 20s or early 30s. But usually by the time you got there, but you got beyond that, there was a very, very small pool to choose from if you were someone hitting the singles scene or nowadays dating sites and that sort of thing. But now with people delaying marriage, the psychopath, whether they're married or not themselves, has a much easier time finding what they would consider high quality exploits out there in dating sites, where I think there I saw somewhere where like half of the people on dating sites are actually married, or singles bars, or wherever single people congregate. And these people, the psychopath and the narcissist, are not going to be held back by the same things that hold other people back. Sometimes I've known guys that are like, oh, I'm not going to ask her out for a date because she's really good looking. She's going to turn me down. The psychopath or the narcissist is going to go, I want someone who's going to look good with, going out with me. And so they will approach them. Most of the time, the psychopath or the narcissist will not marry someone that they think is unattractive. And that goes for men and women. They're going to go for someone that has traits that make them look good. And so they're not going to have problems with that. Now, if they do want to settle down and get married, which many narcissists and psychopaths do, they want families, they want security, they want maybe they just want someone that is there for them. Everyone has that kind of need, to have someone there as a friend or whatever. Now, I know some of the people that are victims of these kinds of people are like going, no, they don't have those feelings. Actually, they do. It's just they have an easy time discarding them, which creates a problem. But I'm not talking about the long term. I'm talking about the short term. These people will go in there and they will ask the person, who most people would say, no way, you're not good enough. You don't make lots of money. You're not attractive. How can you go ask her out? Or if you're a female, how do you expect him to come and approach you or whatever? Psychopaths and narcissists don't care. They could be living in their van and they're still good enough. That's how they feel. And so they'll succeed at that when it comes to jobs. Now, here's one thing that is something people don't understand. Employers want someone that makes them look good. They want success because, they usually have someone above them, be it stockholders or CEOs or whatever. And psychopaths and narcissists are more likely to take chances, to do risk. If someone has a new project And they say, well, we need someone to go to Botswana and arrange this. It'll take about 3 weeks. The psychopath or the narcissist will raise their hand and go. It's a challenge. It's an adventure. You're not going to be bored. Whereas a lot of other people start thinking, no, how's that going to affect my family? What if I don't succeed? It's uncomfortable. And so, therefore, they're shooting themselves down. Whereas the other two types of people, they're perfectly happy to do these kinds of things. Or to start a new branch or of the business or to whatever. They will strive to do it. Now, the danger is they may be foolhardy and not really be qualified and say, yeah, I'll do it. And then they mess everything up. But usually they'll blame someone else in some way and they'll escape any kind of problems. But still, they take the risk. And I'm just thinking that in their brain chemistry, when they're succeeding, those dopamine levels go up. One of the theories about psychopathy, at least, is that their dopamine level is sort of low anyway, but then success and doing all these other things sends it up. Gives more of a thrill. They get more of a thrill out of doing something different than the average person would initially. Same with narcissists to a lesser extent, but still pretty high. And so they're exercising these parts of the brain and developing these parts that are saying win, 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 win. They're used to it. It's like a drug to win. You know, it could be their personal fitness, levels. It could be work. It could be relationships. How they deal with their children. It's winning. It's success. It's to build their persona up. Let them achieve the things they want to achieve. And again, it's going to how they use it is going to depend on the way they were raised, how connected they are to religion. I often think in today's society, you might find more people that are psychopathic or narcissistic that are devout than not, because they read through some of those troubling passages of the Old Testament, like the thou shalt take the sword to, this village or whatever. Some people are so caring and empathetic and loving, they read those kinds of things and they're like, oh no, I can't, they can't reconcile it. Psychopaths and narcissists could easily reconcile it the same way that a top general, when they're bombing someplace somewhere around the world, can reconcile the damage that it does in a very non-empathetic manner, and they're still talking about the destruction, but they're doing it in such a way that it doesn't sound so bad. Okay? I would tend to think that we could learn a little bit from people with these personality disorders. I don't say go out there and be ruthless. I don't say try to get rid of your empathy. I don't think you could. You can mask it, but it'll come out. But maybe learn a little bit about that kind of looking at the world in a winning sort of way. Not looking at like, I'm not worthy, I can't do it, I can't succeed. Don't call on me because it's scary. Okay? Those things are just going to reinforce the opposite. Losing. Avoidance. Whereas striving to try something new, striving to be better, is actually going to make your brain used to that and will actually reprogram you to where you will be the kind of person that will succeed more often, be it in the dating game, be it in the mating game as well, marriage and family, be it in business, or even in politics. Okay? Got to have that winning attitude.